And we are live, so here's the countdown. All right, here we are. Here we are. Jacob's Film Perspectives back. Deontay's not here with us tonight, but that's okay. He'll be here in the comments probably in spirit. And I got a new segment. Nick is coming back, but our special guest here is Lawson. He's a stranger. I don't know him. No, I'm just kidding. He's a great friend of mine, one of my best friends, and
we made a movie together.
yes, we made a movie together. Well, he made the movie. I was his little helper boy, and I was the Phantom. But it's his movie, Phantom of the Fields. Go check that out. Let's shout that out immediately. Plug it all. Phantom of the Fields. And as you guys may know, this episode doesn't have a topic yet, but we're about to see. We're about to see what is it? It's the William Friedkin tribute. Who would have guessed? Who would have guessed? You know, this is usually we talk about new releases. This is the first episode of the podcast where I'm talking about an older movie, like older movies. So, I mean, that's special in that outright. And then we have a new special guest here with Lawson, a filmmaker that's won awards. And, start off, William Friedkin, you know, he sadly passed, 3 weeks ago?
August 7th.
He knows the exact date. Okay, yeah. August 7th. And then his birthday was just Tuesday, right?
Yeah, and his new film that he directed is coming out in Venice Film Festival tomorrow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's actually a very timely podcast for this. And thanks to Lawson, actually. He's the one that reminded me it was his birthday because I wasn't going to do this initially because I passed the time. I know it's been a while, but I'm back. It's been about a month and a week or something. It's been a while, but I'm back. And yeah, we're just gonna praise William Friedkin and talk about William Friedkin because the man was a legend.
He was
pioneer in filmmaking. I mean, we'll have a lot to say, but before that, let's hit you with a JFP visual intro. Let's feast your eyes. And we're back. That a beautiful, amazing intro. And thank you. Will from the network here did that. Props to Will for that. And the King. But yeah, so I mean, since you're the special guest, I mean, where do you want to take this? First, let's get with this. First, give us a story of your contact with William Friedkin, because actually, that's actually a surprising thing. Lawson here has actually talked to the legendary director himself. So, I mean, that's pretty awesome. So, let's hear that.
Yeah, I called him up in 2020. First time I called him, he was out of the country. So I had to call back. I had to call back a few times. And last time I called back, his maid answered. And she said, "Oh, he's in the bathroom right now." She said, "You want to leave a message?" I said, "No, I'll call back." 30 minutes later, I called back and answered the phone. I hear hello. I said, "Is this Billy Friedkin?" He said, "Yes, this is." And I said, "Well, I'm just such a fan of your work. You know, it's just influenced me so much. Is there any advice you can give me?" He said, no, there's no advice. He said, everybody has their own way of doing things. He said, the hell with advice. Everybody has their own way of doing things. Just find your own way of making movies and make them. And he said, I wish you all the luck in the world. with that. He said, I wish I could be more help. He said, but you know, my career was luck. He said, it's luck and ambition. And we talked about a few of his films, and he was very nice, very encouraging, and everything you'd expect him to be. And yeah, he was one of two legendary directors I've ever had any contact with. But I told him, I said, I'll always remember this. And he said, well, it was my pleasure, Lawson. Thank you. It was a short conversation, but it meant a lot.
So I mean, he was a kind guy. I mean, from the interviews you watch, sometimes he may have been a little.
It was the funniest. It was the funniest and most entertaining director interview out there, I think.
Yeah, if you guys want a good one, go watch the one he did with Nicholas Winding Refn about Sorcerer on YouTube. That's a great interview that Lawson actually showed me, and that one's nice. That one's great. But
I mean, the one Oliver Stone. It's a printed interview, I think.
So look that up. Look that up with Oliver Stone. Go see that one too. And I mean, as of Deonta here asked, how'd that interview come together? Did you just?
I made several contacts in the film business, and I'm friends with a guy who's friends with Billy, so I got his number through all that. This business is a lot of connections. That's how I got to talk to Peter Bogdanovich also.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to talk with a few directors. He's met some famous people, but today it's Friedkin time. And in tribute of him, it's a sad loss. I mean, he lived a long, good life. I mean, I forgot how old he was.
He'd have been 88, so he was 87. I saw an interview of him a few months back at the Turner Classic Movie Festival, and he didn't look well. I knew he wasn't probably going to be around much longer.
So, I mean, he lived a long life at 87. I mean, and because me and Lawson were both filmmakers, obviously, and as someone who comes from SEMO as a film major, I mean, we studied a little bit of William Friedkin in class. I mean, so I mean, he's had a huge impact on filmmakers where he's being taught in class. I mean, that's something. With this film, I think it was his film, The French Connection, we learned about. But I can't remember. It's been so long. But he was a pioneer for a lot of things. I mean, he created arguably what I would say is the best chase scene ever in The French Connection. One of the best horror films ever, and The Exorcist, which, I mean, The Conjuring, Insidious, all that. I mean, they have to give some thanks to The Exorcist because it was like the first one that blew the doors open for those type of movies. You didn't really see. I mean, you saw a few, but in America, like widestream popular, it was The Exorcist that broke the doors.
I think it was one of the first, maybe the first horror film that ever got any Oscar recognition.
Yeah, and I mean, he went on, and I mean, after that, a lot of people kind of fall off from him. After that, it goes from he goes to Sorcerer, and I mean, that was a box office failure, but I think it's a masterpiece of underrated masterpiece. Nobody has seen by him usually, but
it's a great
definitely,
film.
Yeah, definitely go see Sorcerer. If you haven't, go check that one out. If you loved The French Connection, if you loved The Exorcist, I think you'll really like The Sorcerer. It's very unconventional. It's basically his epic. It's what I see it as his epic because it is. Yeah, it was huge in scale. It was I mean, this was back in 77, so I mean, the practical effects he used, I mean, there was no CGI, there was nothing. He had to do all this in camera. So I mean, that feat of itself alone, and as Beyonce, head of the network here, says well-deserved Oscar. I think he got the Oscar for French Connection, I think, wasn't it?
Best director, I think.
Yeah, best director for French Connection. And he he kind of went on and he made uh other films, Live and Die in LA in the 80s, and then Cruising before that with Al Pacino, which a lot of people haven't seen either. But really, he kind of, I don't want to say faded off to obscurity, but if you weren't a film fan, you really didn't hear of his name much anymore. And I mean, that's sad, but it's also, I mean, I feel like that's where he fit because he didn't want to be the George Lucas. He didn't want to be a Steven Spielberg. He wanted to make his own films on his own merits. He didn't want to. He wanted to make his films when he wanted to make them. He didn't want to. He wasn't trying to be an audience pleaser. I mean, he wanted to, of course, entertain the audience, but he wasn't so much about that. He's more about his craft, about his work, and that's why. I mean, if you're a filmmaker, I think every filmmaker will tell you William Friedkin is an inspiration to you in some way or other. The Exorcist, The French Connection, Sorcerer, even To Live and Die in LA, even later on like The Hunted, Killer Joe, stuff like that. I mean, at some point, I think every filmmaker has been or will be influenced by William Friedkin, and that's why I'm doing a whole podcast episode dedicated to him, because I think I do think he's that important in the film industry, and his importance is very underlooked. He's very underlooked, and like peak horror for Beyonce, I agree. Easily top 5 horror films for me. It's not my favorite. John Carpenter has that with Halloween, but Exorcist is definitely top 5 for me. I mean, so like, what's your favorite Friedkin film, Lawson?
I guess I would say The Exorcist. French Connection's also definitely close. I love the car scene, the car chase, which he did for real. They didn't get any permits. They just drove into oncoming traffic at 90 miles an hour. But yeah, I think The Exorcist.
So, I mean, it's The Exorcist for me, and French Connection is right behind it for sure. And then I would say Sorcerer is right there with it too. Sorcerer is, I watched that recently. That movie is just an epic masterpiece. I mean, just top to bottom perfect. And then it's, I mean, you could do a whole episode on just Sorcerer and just the problems he had getting that made and all that. But he never, I mean, that's another good lesson to learn from him. He never gave up. I mean,
yeah, and Sorcerer came out the same week as Star Wars, so that he had an uphill battle trying to get people in the theater to see that one.
Yeah, I mean, imagine your movie going against one of the most famous movies of all time now. I mean, it wasn't necessarily his fault for Sorcerer bombing, obviously, but it's still a great film that everybody needs to watch at least once.
He always said that was the closest film to in his mind that he ever made.
And I mean, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's a 5 out of 5, A+ for me. I mean, I watched it. I was shocked. It was perfect. And even like, I know you watched this. You told me you watched this the other day. The Hunted is an underrated little hidden gem that's actually pretty. It's actually pretty. It has a pretty good, like, big production value. Like there at the beginning, the opening of The Hunted. I mean, with the whole war scene going on.
Well, that film had a budget of like $55 or $60 million, I think.
Yeah, like it, and not a lot of people talk about it, but it's a good. If you like, it's very similar. I will say it's very similar to The Fugitive. It definitely gives off those vibes, but like,
And Rambo, First Blood, had some of
Yeah,
that in there.
Rambo First Blood is kind of a mix between those two, but I think it has enough of its own merits that you should check that one out too. I think it's worth it. It's not a masterpiece, but I think it's worth it. I mean, it has Tommy Lee Jones, Benicio del Toro. I mean, there you go, right there. Just, I mean, and that's where the Fugitive connection kind of comes to. It has Tommy Lee Jones kind of playing the same type of role, but he did great in it, and like everything with Friedkin's direction, like we were talking about this, everything is so visceral. It's just real. It's just the fighting, I mean, when there's people getting stabbed, the way the blood comes, it's just so visceral the way he shoots his films, and I think that's a mark that is missing in a lot of films today, and I think it's a mark that only he could really. I don't think his style could be replicated by anybody. I think he has his own unique style, and like you can kind of tell when you're watching a Friedkin film.
Even his bad movies they're interesting. Yeah, he always said that his worldview was that there were no good or bad people. Everybody had, he liked to say, Jesus and Hitler in them. And if you watch his movies, that you can see that. To Live and Die in L.A., you know, these cops commit a robbery so they can get money to pay a counterfeiter to print him some bills so they can bust him. If you've seen that film, and no, there's no good or bad people. It's just it's a mixture, a gray area. That was throughout all his work.
Yeah, I mean, Sorcerer. Everybody in that, I mean, the stars in Sorcerer, everybody in that movie is not a great person, but it's about them doing something that's going to help this community. So it's always got that undertone. It's the Exorcist, the priest that lost his faith, and basically regains it by helping a possessed girl, and then the French Connection. A cop, he has to do some things. They're questionable for cops, but I mean he gets it done, and arguably the French Connection might be the one that actually no, the Exorcist, because the Exorcist. See, that's the thing with William Friedkin is all Exorcist, French Connection, and I think even Sorcerer have inspired so many other films.
I mean, you want to talk about his influence? It's not just his films. If it hadn't been for Billy Friedkin, Gene Hackman might not have had the career he had. He brought out Bill Butler, the cinematographer who shot Jaws and Grease, out to L.A. He brought Tobe Hooper from Texas after he made Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so we might not have got Poltergeist. Spielberg cast Roy Scheider in Jaws because he saw him in Billy's movie.
So see, he made waves in literally all kinds of ways in the film industry. He's like we've been saying already, one of the most, I think, important filmmakers, definitely of his time, and even still. I mean, he wasn't as popular and he wasn't as successful when it comes to box office and stuff like that as his other peers in the 70s, but I mean, I think people, and I mean, when you talk to a regular person, you're like, William Friedkin, they may know him from The Exorcist, maybe like, oh, the guy that directed The Exorcist. But usually he's not really a household name still. And that's why, again, we need to do this podcast to like shine some light on him and give him more praise. Cause I mean, the man has done so much. And yeah, so that's why we're here. So, I mean, where do you want to take this? Where do you want to dissect? I mean, because at the end of the day, this show is just guys talking movies. So, I mean, and I usually let the guest go with it. So, I mean, where do you want to start?
We're talking about how realistic his films were. I think that counts for two things. One is he liked to print first take, which is me 1 to 3 takes. Also, you get a spontaneity in there, and it gives it an energy where it doesn't feel rehearsed, and you do it. I think that's one reason. The other reason was if he made a film about cops, he hung out with cops, had them on the set. If he made a film about counterfeiters, he had actual counterfeiters on the set. When he made Killer Joe, it was based off a cop that he knew that was a hired killer on the side. you know, he made a mafia movie. He hung out with the mafia. He totally immersed himself to make it real.
Yes, and I mean, uh, he did. I mean, he was dedicated to the craft. I mean, that's really the strongest thing we can say about him is, I mean, he loved making films, and he was I mean,
He
he
started
did.
out in TV.
Yeah, I mean, because here's the thing with you. You have more knowledge on Friedkin than I do for sure. So I mean, just say what you. I mean, like I said, you're kind of the guide of this episode. We're talking about Friedkin, but you're my Friedkin expert. So I mean, let's go.
We're in bad hands then. All the hopes in me were lost. Did you ever hear the story about how he got the Exorcist?
I actually did not, and actually, I bet a lot of people haven't. So actually, tell us that.
So he was a fledgling director. He'd done a few movies that did no business in the 60s. And he got called in to do a script of, I think it was called Peter Gunn, famous director, producer, Blake Edwards, I think was his name, married to Julie Andrews. And he got the script. He was so excited. He went home and he thought it was terrible. And so he comes back, and in typical Billy Friedkin fashion, when this big producer asked this nobody yet director what he thought of the script, he said, "I think it's the biggest piece of shit I've ever read in my life." He said, "Your worst enemy wouldn't have written this script for you." And Blake and him had a big argument, and he threw him out of the office. And there was a bunch of people standing in the room. So he's walking to his car, and he hears somebody say, "Mr. Friedkin." He turns around, and this guy comes up to him, and he said, my name is William Peter Blatty." And he said, "I just want to thank you for your honesty." He said, "I wrote that script." And he said, "Well, oh, I'm sorry." He said, "No." He said it said Blake Edwards on it. He said, "Yeah, he does that." He said, "But we all knew that script didn't work, and nobody wanted to be honest with him because he was, had so much power and influence. So I just want to thank you for that." And he said, "Okay." He left. 2 years later, he's doing press for the French Connection, and he gets a package. He opens it up, and it says The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty on it. And he read it. I think he started reading it, and he couldn't stop. And there was a phone number in there, and he called William Peter Blatty, and he said, "What is this?" He said, "Would you like it?" He said, "It's great." He said, "You want to direct it?" He goes, "Why me?" He said, "Because you're the only director that never lied to me." And he carried that with him 2 or 3 years and gave him his biggest hit of his career.
So I mean, that right there. I mean, that's the thing about Friedkin. He never shied away from saying his mind. He always said what was on his mind, and it led to some hilarious interview clips. And just The Exorcist alone is just. I mean, we've said it. I mean, I think he's made 3 masterpieces in his career, and I mean, I haven't seen his newer work. I think his newest movie I've seen by him is The Hunted. So I'm kind of behind.
I saw Killer. I didn't like Killer Joe that much, but I have to revisit it. I liked Bug. I thought Bug was really good. It had a really dark sense of humor, and
And speaking of that, dark sense of humor, since we're bringing that up, my old buddy Nick wanted to be talked about on this show. He texted me here. I'm bringing it up, guys. He texted me and he said, because I told him I was going to kidnap him, get him on the show, and he's at work right now. But anyway, he asked me to tell his hot takes on the show. So here are Nick's hot takes. Now, if you guys remember, Nick, I think, was in the first 2 episodes of Jacob's Film Perspectives. He's kind of taking a hiatus. I don't know. He's a weird guy. He's probably, he's probably under a bridge somewhere. Who knows? He's probably not even working. Don't lie to us, Nick. But anyway, here are his hot takes. He said, to start off, Exorcist is mid. In all caps, mid. Okay, that's Nick's hot take. If you watched the show before and you've seen Nick, you would expect Nick to say a hot take like that, which is funny because Nick is also really big into he's into Christianity and religion. So The Exorcist is mid is kind of odd to me because that whole film is about a guy regaining his faith, if you follow the themes. But he goes on to say, Bug, Killer Joe, French Connection, and To Live and Die in L.A. are his best films. He said, I have spoken, thus my opinion is correct. And then I said, you're insane. And he said, he said, I'm correct. And let's just say, I don't think he's right about the French Connection. The other ones, I don't know if he's seen Sorcerer. He probably hasn't, little weirdo, but Nick, watch Sorcerer and then come back. But yeah, that was Nick's hot takes that he wanted me. That's a little. I'm gonna call that segment Nick's hot takes. He always has these weird hot takes, man. He's always coming out of the woodwork with some hot takes, and I think that maybe you go.
I would agree. The Exorcist does have some filler in it that could be cut out, but it's still a great film, and I want whatever he's smoking so I can hallucinate too.
Yeah, he always has these hot takes. He wanted to be a part. He wanted to be here in spirit. So Nick, there you are in spirit. Lawson kind of agreed with you there, and maybe you could hit him up after and tell him what you've been on, because it seems like some good stuff, Nick. But anyway, kind of Rockstar says so much filler in The Exorcist.
Not a lot, but there's some scenes you could have cut out, especially if you watch the director's cut, which isn't nearly as good as the theatrical cut.
Yeah, I think actually thank you, Austin. That's a great segue. I think we should talk about that for a second, because that is an anomaly that I came across and that I was shocked by, and because oh yeah, what's up, Chris? I should have recognized the name. Chris, friend of mine here in the chat. But keep adding your opinions, Chris. But yeah, I originally watched The Exorcist. The first time I watched it was the theatrical, and I loved it. It blew me away. I gave it A+. It was one of the first horror films in a long time to creep me out and actually scare me. I was shocked. I was like, oh. It was hilarious, but it also terrified me at the same time. And that's the thing about Friedkin. He has such a dark sense of humor. And if you look at The Exorcist, yeah, it's a really messed up movie. The little girl does some terrible things. But if you have a dark sense of humor, it's also will make you laugh out loud. But other than that, it terrified me, and I just absolutely loved it. And then I came back a few years later, and I was introducing somebody to The Exorcist. And for some reason, I bought it on my Vudu, and they only had the director's cut available. So that's what we watched, was the director's cut. And that was the first time I had watched it. And I showed it to her, and I watched it as well. And she came away with saying that it was super overrated because she heard me talking about it, my friends talking about it. And she came away saying it was super overrated, and she didn't see it how it's this classic great horror film. And to a degree, I can see why, because the director's cut is a big step down. I think it is too much filler in the director's cut.
The ending, it really bogged the ending.
Yeah,
The theatrical cut, it ends with him looking down those stairs, and it's a perfect ending. The director's cut, I think they do a scene of like the priest and the detective together doing like a Casablanca walk away, saying this is going to be great friendship, and it doesn't work.
yeah, and it's kind of like Chris says here. It is one of those director's cuts that is like, honestly, there isn't too much different in the director's cut, but what is different, it makes it so like it waters it down, and it kind of it just makes it longer, and it's just, that's the one thing where it's like, man, the director's cut, you think William Friedkin, a great director, you think you'd want to watch the director's cut, but the theatrical cut is by far better. And I mean, if anybody has a disagreement, they can comment below, but I think the theatrical cut is the masterpiece of it. I think the director's cut does take it down a little bit.
Actually, the director's cut is William Peter Blatty's cut, really, because he was mad at Friedkin for taking all those scenes out back in the 70s, and Friedkin agreed to put them back in for another release in the early 2000s. So I think really the original is the director's cut, and then the one in the 2000s was Blatty's cut.
See, I didn't know that, so that's interesting. And I
Which
mean,
film with Exorcist 3.
I mean, I mean, that makes more sense to me now, because I feel like the theatrical cut, there's barely, I don't think there's any filler in the theatrical cut, in my opinion. It's very, I thought it was pretty fast paced, and that's another thing I like about Friedkin. He doesn't have excess on his film. He always cuts the fat off usually. He's very good at he's obviously probably in the editing room, and he makes sure that there's just no fat usually on his films. Like, I can't think of anything to cut out of Sorcerer or French Connection. So I mean, or even The Haunted, really. They're all like brisk. They all have like a brisk, nice pace to them, and I think the director's cut kind of waters that part down, and especially the scene. And it's funny because the director's cut has the most classic scene that a lot of people remember from the movie, of her going down the stairs, the spider walk. That's in the director's cut. It's not in the theatrical. Mm-hmm. Because when I watched the theatrical, I was like, where's that scene? Because at the end of the movie, I was like, I didn't see that scene. And then turns out it's in the director's cut. And I'm glad it wasn't in the theatrical, because watching it in the director's, the effects aren't too great on that one, I'd say.
Well, they didn't use it. They couldn't CGI the wires out back in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, they had a lot more limited technology than they do now, so I can see that. And another thing, there is one scene, though, from the director's cut that I will say that should stay in, and that's them on the stairs. Lawson knows this. I've told him about this. The conversation he has on the stairs with the priest, I think, is great, and it should have been in the theater. Put that in the theatrical, and it goes from masterpiece to like, oh, beautiful masterpiece. Like, it's still a masterpiece without it, but that just it would have made it just even better. Like, but other than that, if you're here and you've never seen The Exorcist, you're crazy. Get on that while you're watching my show, you weirdo. Get out here. But anyway, no. But seriously, watch the theatrical if you're gonna watch The Exorcist for the first time. Check out the director's cut after, just to see maybe you like it. I mean, some people prefer it over, I've seen online, but definitely go with theatrical first. Would you agree, Lawson?
I would say don't waste your time on the director's cut, but yeah, watch The Exorcist if you hadn't seen it.
Yeah. And I mean, where do you want to take it from here?
Uh, what all of Billy's films have you seen?
Deontay, theatrical for the win. I've seen The Hunted, Sorcerer, Exorcist, French Connection. That's what I've
Okay.
seen.
To Live and Die in LA is pretty good. I watched that after he. It has a good as French Connection, but it gets close.
See, To Live and Die in LA, when he died, that was the one I first went to watch because I saw what's his, forgot the actor's name, but he's in Michael Mann's Manhunter.
I don't know.
And I forgot. They also said that that film kind of had a Michael Mann vibe to it, which I don't know if that's true or not. But
It.
I went to look it up, and it's not available anywhere on streaming. You'd have to do illegal stuff, but to watch it, or if you own it on physical, of course, physical copy is always the way to go anyway. And actually, Kino Lorber actually released a new 4K Blu-ray of it, so I need to buy that. I need to be on that. I have it on Blu-ray. I just haven't watched it yet because I'm lazy, and like everybody in today's world, I rather stream it than go and grab a actual physical copy. Sadly, even though I have a ton of Blu-rays as I hit my desk, but yeah, I just punched my desk. I'm that angry at it now, but yeah.
I
So
don't
that's what I've seen. What have you seen?
seen French Connection, Exorcist, Sorcerer, Cruising, To Live and Die in L.A., Hunted, uh, The Guardian, which wasn't good, Killer Joe, Bug. I think that's it.
So basically, most of them.
He did about 20. I've seen about 9 or 10 of them.
That's crazy. He did 20 because you don't hear about them.
That's
Even the
that's it.
ones, even the ones you watched, you don't hear about. Like some of them, like Bug and Killer Joe. I remember actually when Bug came out. I remember seeing the trailer on TV. But Killer Joe, I mean, people talk about the one famous chicken scene, but like other than that, I mean, that's not really talked about. And it's got McConaughey, and it's like Cruising has Al Pacino, so it's like Live and Die in LA to Live and Die in LA has Willem Dafoe, so it's like, why aren't these films? It's just it's kind of weird that his films aren't talked about like they should be. It's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, that's it was kind of a trend with a few of the filmmakers in the 70s, though. Like I said, Peter Bogdanovich, who I knew a little bit, he had Last Picture Show, What's Up, Doc, and then Paper Moon, and then he never had really a big hit again. And Francis Coppola had, Godfather 1 and 2 and Apocalypse Now in the 70s, and he never really had a big hit again. So it's the way it goes with some guys.
Yeah, even Dracula didn't do too well. And I think out of those people, he's up there. I'm not gonna say he's up there because I mean, The Godfather, Godfather Part Two. I don't know if he hits Coppola level, but he's up there for sure.
Yeah, there was a big wave of great directors in the 70s. I said we lost Peter last year and Billy this year, and they're just that age. I think Coppola's 84, De Palma's probably 83 or so. Scorsese's in his 80s. Yeah, those guys are just getting at the age where we're gonna start losing them.
It's sad to see because that was really like the last. I mean, I feel like we're starting to see it again a little bit with like Damien Chazelle and Denis Villeneuve and a few of those directors and Nolan, of course. But like other than that, there's very few like I would consider what we learned in film school as auteur filmmakers. There's very few, but the 70s just was an explosion of them. After the 60s, when we got to the 70s was just like the new wave for filmmaking.
Yeah, the studio system died, and the directors started helming their own stuff, and that's what we got was the big boom in the 70s.
And it was, I mean, it was uncomparable, man. It was, I mean, some of them, Scorsese came out of that, Lucas, Spielberg, Coppola, Friedkin, obviously, De
Bogdanovich,
Palma. Who else?
Bogdanovich,
Bogdanovich.
what's his name? He's not around anymore. He directed Nashville. Robert Altman.
Robert Altman. And it's sorely missed. And I mean, I feel like we don't really get those anymore. And like I said, like all of you people that love like The Conjuring or like any of the new wave possession movie, like there's a possession movie a dime a dozen now every year. It seems like there's always some, and I mean, never will one do it like The Exorcist. I don't. You can't peak it. You can't top it.
I don't know why they keep trying. Just like they're doing a sequel, supposedly. It's going to come out soon.
Actually, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because that's actually great. And I mean, I will be watching it because I have this podcast. But it is kind of sad because the guys that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride that wrote the Halloween trilogy, that whole script, that whole trilogy, the last trilogy that we got that's been we don't even have to talk about those movies. They're not worth it. But they're now Blumhouse going to have a new Exorcist trilogy. And the first one, called The Exorcist Believer, comes out October 6th now. The date actually just got moved up yesterday. So this podcast is actually coming in timing in a lot of nice ways. But yeah, October 6th, that one will be coming out, and I will be watching it because I have this podcast. And I mean, I am an Exorcist fan, so I am morbidly curious because they are bringing back, what's her name?
Ellen Burstyn.
Yeah, they're bringing her back.
She's about 90 years old now.
Yeah. I don't know. I was thinking of that. I was like, how are you going to do a trilogy? And I was like, is she going to make it through the whole trilogy?
Say her daughter slaps her like in the first one. She falls on the floor. There goes her hip, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, like exactly. So, like, I don't know how that's going to work. But I will say I did watch the trailer, and I hate to say this. I know Lawson is going to look down upon me, but because Lawson is in no support of that film whatsoever. He won't watch it, which I respect. I'm a curious little guy, so I'm gonna watch it because I do those weird things. I'm just a weird guy, but I do those things. But anyway, yeah, I'm gonna watch it. We're not gonna, because Lawson definitely will not be watching it, but I will be watching it. And I did watch I saw the trailer before a few movies I've seen in theaters, and the trailer did give me goosebumps because they did play the Tubular Bells, and it gave me goosebumps. And then I saw the mom, and then I was like, man, so I'm excited. I'm actually excited for it. It's kind of weird that it's coming out so quickly after Friedkin died. It's kind of funny how life works.
I don't think he wanted to see it. I think that's
yeah, Friedkin died because of that movie. That's going to be the new narrative. We're going to push.
I was looking forward to him ripping that movie a new one because I knew he would. John Carpenter won't say anything about the new Halloween movies. He just won't comment. But Friedkin never held back from that. I was hoping he would rip that movie a new one. It's sad he won't be able to.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I'm excited to watch the movie, but I would have loved to see what he thought about it. Which maybe, I mean, he may have already seen it before he died. He probably did, honestly. He probably did have, or maybe he didn't even want to watch it. He probably had no interest. He's probably like, nah, I'll just get rid of that movie. I don't care.
Well, I know he regretted that he saw Exorcist 2. He said he came close to suicide after watching that movie.
Well, I mean, I will never watch that movie because of the terrible stuff. And I mean, you don't do a sequel to The Exorcist. But I mean, they did do a sequel to The Exorcist. The Exorcist 3 is actually a great movie, but it's not. They could have. I feel like they could have made that movie without it being a sequel. And that was more William Peter Blatty's doing. And I mean, Friedkin had nothing to do with it. It was, all him. And I mean, it is. I mean, technically, The Exorcist, that is his script. That's his story that he created. Friedkin just directed it. So if he wanted, if William Peter Blatty's behind this new, you know,
He died about 6 years ago.
well, well, he's definitely not behind it then, unless he's been
Possessing everybody.
Yeah, he's going around possessing everybody, like make some more. Which I know he was kind of famously known for like being touchy about his scripts from what I've seen and heard. Because he's even the Exorcist 3, he wanted to name it something different, didn't he? A Legion, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, he didn't want it to be an Exorcist sequel, and I think they kind of forced him into it. But I think there's two cuts of that movie. I've never seen the director's cut. I've just seen the theatrical one.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. There is two cuts of that. I've seen the ending of both of them, and the theatrical is a better ending because it's more.
It's more cinematic.
Yeah, it's much more cinematic. George C. Scott. It's just amazing seeing him just yell. So, yeah, because like the director's cut, I'll just spoil it. I mean, the movie's been out since the 90s, so the director's cut, George, if you know the movie, he talks to this entity that's in I think it's a mental hospital, isn't it? Like insane asylum.
I think it's been a few years.
Yeah, it's been a few years for me too. But it's like this insane asylum, and he's talking with this guy, and he ends up showing it's Brad Dourif who plays the guy, and then he ends up showing his face as Father Karras from the first movie. I mean, it's not really him, but it's like the demon messing with him, and because of course, if you've seen The Exorcist, you know Father Karras is no longer with us. But in the movie, George C. Scott just walks in the theatrical ending. There's like a whole the floor opens up. He's thrown against the wall. It's this big theatrical thing. There's nailed to the cross. I think Father Karras is nailed to the cross, isn't he, when he comes up?
No, it's a little boy that got killed. He's got the nails in his eyes.
Oh yeah, okay. So it's a little boy. So I mean, yeah, and so it's a lot more theatrical. Not visceral, but like visually, more visually going on there. And the director's cut ending is literally George C. Scott walks in, shoots the guy in the head, and then walks out.
Yeah.
So I mean,
that's the most important part of a movie is the ending. You got to end big.
I agree. I mean, I like some endings that are minimal. I do. But I mean, with that movie, it had to have been something like it was in the theatrical. It couldn't have just been him just walking up, shooting him in the head. Because then that would have begged the question, well, why didn't you just do that at the beginning of the movie?
Yeah, a minimal film ending that I think really works is No Country for Old Men. So yeah, I agree. It goes both ways.
Yeah, which I mean, this isn't Coen Brothers, but No Country for Old Men is a masterpiece, and you guys all should go watch that now if you've never seen it. Like now, go run. Just click off of this. Don't stop looking at my ugly face. I mean, Lawson's a handsome guy, but like, don't look at my ugly face. Go watch No Country for Old Men. I mean, I'd much rather you do that.
You're better looking than both of us. He's got a lot better haircut.
Yeah, Javier Bardem is just beautiful in that film. How much have you lost in a coin toss? Or whatever. What does he say? Gosh, it's been a while.
Most you ever lost in a coin toss?
Yeah, what's the most you've ever lost in a coin toss? What? I don't know. Just the old man in that kills me.
That'd have been a good short film. That just one scene.
It is. Yeah, it's like a good little vignette of a film. Of just him going in there and just the wrapper slowly spreading across the desk is just so perfect. Oh, No Country for Old Men. That could be another episode. No Country for Old Men, honestly. But We're on the Friedkin train today.
Yep.
So the French Connection was his best, or not his best, but his first. Sorry, I still have. I recently, if you've been wondering why I've been gone for so long, I had COVID, and it's still messing with. I've had COVID brain now. I feel like my brain is just foggy. So like if I mess up here, just blame it on the big O C. I'm better now. I'm not positive anymore. I'm good. But yeah, blame it on the if I mess up at any in this podcast, which I already have probably a million times, just that's what I'm going to blame it on. But yeah, French Connection was his first big film. I think his first was it his. It might have been his first film, was it?
No, he did. He did a film with Sonny and Cher called Good Times. Was his first movie. I haven't ever seen it, and he did about 4 other movies. Most of them are based on plays before the French Connection. And I think he was dating Howard Hawks' daughter. Howard Hawks was another big director, and he asked Howard what Howard thought of his movies, and he said do something with a great chase in it, and he did the French Connection.
I know a little tidbit there. See, this is why I have Lawson on for this tribute because I couldn't think of anybody better to have on for this tribute because I mean, you know it. You've talked to the man.
Yep.
The God rest his soul.
Yeah, when you text me that day, said we'd lost Friedkin, that just ruined my whole day.
You know, I know I look like a fake fan because I've only seen 4 of his movies. I held up a 3, 4. This is what's happening here. But anyway,
We were like this before COVID. Don't lie. I know this man.
that's true. Okay. We all know. Okay. Yeah. But anyway, so we were yeah, I texted him that and when I saw it, it ruined my like I've only seen 4 of his films, but like and actually at that time I'd only seen 3 of his 3 yeah, because I watched Sorcerer after he died, so 3 of his films. But the French Connection and Exorcist had such an impact on me and just the way I approach filmmaking, the way I think about filmmaking, and just The Exorcist alone is just. I mean, for the promotional stuff I did for this podcast, I mean, it's all Exorcist music and stuff because it's that iconic where it's just you can't make another movie like that. And when the day he died, both me and Lawson, we just went into a state of despair. I mean, we probably already were, but like we went into more utter, complete despair because I mean, and that sounds silly because I mean, I've never met the guy, I've never known the guy. Lawson's talked to him, but I mean, it was brief. We're not like his brother or best friend or anything, but like that shows just how much of an impact he has on like young filmmakers. That like his death, would do that to like people because he was that important to filmmaking and anybody who wants to go into like making movies, just watch Friedkin. Honestly.
Well, I mean, people like me and you, movies are our whole life. I mean, they're a huge part of our life. When a huge part of our life dies, it affects us. I mean, we like that film we made together, Phantom of the Fields. If you watch the ending scene in the bedroom of that, it's very, very, very influenced by the ending scene in the bedroom of The Exorcist.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to bring that up because that's also a nice little tidbit. Is the short film that we made together has Exorcist influence and like just being on. I remember when we were, and I mean we can go into this. I mean it's a little. I mean we're plugging it, but it's okay. But it's my show. I can do what I want. But anyway, we when we were making it, just even being on set, I remember us talking about Friedkin quite a bit, and like just you talking especially about like the takes, about just 1 to 3 takes, and I mean like, and I mean you really did. I mean I could really see the inspiration of Friedkin had on you just from being on set with you. Is just and even seeing that, and then thinking about like going rewatching The Exorcist a few years ago. Might have been a year ago. Actually, I can't remember when I rewatched The Exorcist. It's been like a year and a half, maybe. But just going back and revisiting that film, and then going and watching The French Connection a few years back, and then seeing Sorcerer recently. It's just the man is just so important to filmmaking, and that's why I wanted to do this episode, just because I want to put the importance on his name and try to get his. I know he's dead now, so he can't really see the praise anymore, but just shine light on his work and like show more to his work, because he really is just like so monumental for filmmakers. I mean, if you want to be a good filmmaker, you have inspirations,
He always said, "Don't go to film school, just watch Hitchcock." And I agree. Everything. I never went to film school, and if you want to be a filmmaker, film school can help you with uh, the technical side of it, learning all that stuff, and maybe build some connections. But the bare nut and bolts of being a director, you can just watch other guys' films. You can watch Hitchcock or Friedkin, and you can learn how to tell a story visually.
I mean, exactly. Like, I mean, honestly, when I mean, I can say this because I have a degree in film technically, but I learned more being on the set, making Phantom of the Fields with Lawson, and making the Untitled Self Portrait, the film I made for it was basically like a film thesis type of thing where you made a film for a class, and I learned more just being on set, working with the camera, doing the shots, talking with the actors, talking with directors, other people working on the film. I think, I mean, experience is the best experience. Like getting on a set, that's the best. And I mean, but before that, yeah, exactly. Like watching Friedkin, you can be inspired. Like, and
He,
like I said, it's just
he's the only. He started out in live TV, directing live TV in Chicago. He's the only filmmaker I've ever heard of that made a film that saved anybody's life. There was a black guy on death row for murder, and the warden and the priest for death row all thought he was innocent. And Billy made a documentary about it, and the governor saw it, and he pardoned the guy's life, and that was his start in the film business. He got jobs directing films after he made that documentary.
where was this in? See, this is why I bring you. Like, I didn't even know that. Wow,
It's called The People versus Paul Crump. I've never seen it.
that's.
But he was at a party and he saw a priest. Just small conversation. The priest told him that he worked on death row, and he said, "You ever know anybody that you thought was innocent?" And he said, "This one guy there now." And Billy couldn't think about anything else the rest of the weekend. And he went and met the warden, and met the guy, and made a documentary. And it came out in time enough for the governor to see it and pardon the guy before he went to the electric chair.
I mean, that's just absolutely insane. That's crazy.
He always said he said, "I didn't realize," he said, "the power of film could save a man's life." He said, "Then I went to Hollywood and was quickly dispelled of that notion."
Yeah, and I mean but like, yeah, I think we need to stress the importance of that. I mean, I didn't even know this information. Like, you just dropped a knowledge bomb on me right there. Like, I didn't even know this information until you just told me that. But that's just absolutely insane. Like, he actually saved the man's life with film. Like, and I mean, that's the whole point of like why I do this podcast, why we watch movies, why any of this even makes sense is just because, and I think that's why we should celebrate Friedkin, is because he got that. And I mean, he was a symbol of that filmmaking is more than just filmmaking. It's more, films are more than just films. They live on, they become a part of the culture. They they can save lives. Like literally, like films are just so important.
He took his last breath a few weeks ago, but The Exorcist is going to be around a lot longer than me and you ever will be.
Exactly. Like, I mean, that will live on for years and years. That'll live on for probably at least another 100 years, probably. I mean, somebody somewhere would be like, The Exorcist would come up somehow. And I mean, that's the power of film and making art is just, even when, our time is up, I mean, the the art lives forever. I mean, it goes on. And I mean, that's
Yeah.
important to think about. Friedkin is the best way to just like, in honor of him is just watch his films, honestly. Because that was him. I mean, that was what he wanted to see. That's what he wanted to communicate to people when he made a film is, you always want to communicate a theme or message. I mean, that was him.
If you watch movies, you can see the director's personality and their worldviews in their films, and Friedkin's a shining example of that.
I agree. And like Deontay said right here, The Exorcist is like a titan in the movie business. I agree with that.
It,
It
it
really
brought
is.
it brought horror films into the mainstream and gave them respect that they didn't have. Before that, horror films were kind of B movies or exploitation movies, and then that got Oscar recognition, and then you had films later on like Silence of the Lambs get Oscar recognition.
I mean, you even look it up to now with what Ari Aster is doing with A24 and Hereditary and Midsummer. I mean, all of that is possible in a sense because of what Friedkin did in the 70s with The Exorcist. And I mean, of course, he made other films, so I don't want it to be a completely exorcist centric show, but like,
Well, when he that last interview he did before he died, he said, "When I die, they're not going to say the guy that directed the Sonny and Cher movie just died." He said they're going to say The Exorcist. So he knew that was going to be his legacy, and I think he was proud of that.
and I mean, he should be because that will live on for absolutely forever. I mean, that will be ever. It's just like it's so he's so like important that it's hard to find the words to relay that importance to other people. Like me and people like Lawson and Deontay here in the chat, and even Chris probably seen The Exorcist. We all know how important William Friedkin is. We all know how great The Exorcist is, but like I don't think people understand the importance and the monumental amount of just amount of inspiration William Friedkin gave to the filmmaking business in general. And I mean, that comes to the question from Deontay here. Where do you two put William Friedkin on your top 10 directors list? Where would you put him for you personally?
It's tough to say. I'd say he's in my top 10. He's not in my top 5. And we got my favorite director, Sergio Leone. And you got Hitchcock, Roman Polanski, David Lean, and Spielberg are my top 5. But I'd put Friedkin right after that, along with John Carpenter. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's many great directors out there.
Yeah, I would put. I'd probably say Friedkin is probably. I'd have to put him. He might not even be in my top 20 or top 10. He's in my top 20, obviously, for sure. But he might crest top 10 maybe at 9 or 10. But I mean, 3 of his movies are in like my top 150. Like I'd put The Sorcerer, French Connection, and Exorcist all in my top 150 favorite movies. Like they're definitely up there. I mean, The Exorcist is a top 5 favorite horror movie for me. So he's
Well,
definitely.
if you go to favorites, I would say he's in the top 10. But as far as the influence he had on me, I would say definitely top 5.
And I mean, I can attend to that. Just seeing we're making Phantom of the Fields together. And I would say the same for me, honestly. Like when I think about filmmaking advice, one of the things I go to is Friedkin talking about the the 1 to 3 takes, and I think about his video where he goes. There's a great video on YouTube, I forgot the name of it, where he goes over the chase scene in French Connection.
Yeah.
That if you're into filmmaking, if you're a budding filmmaker, if you're somebody that wants to get into filmmaking, just watch Friedkin interviews and because they're also hilarious. Watch them for that too. But there's actually really in between the hilarity, there's actually even the one with Nicholas Winding Refn, he actually says some really great, gives a lot of great knowledge in that interview.
I think the reason I liked him so much is because, like I said, him and Peter Bogdanovich are the only two directors I ever had any kind of personal contact with.
Yeah, that's a special thing, and
especially Peter.
Just, and I'm milking that because I know a person that talked to William Friedkin, so but even that, hey, I know somebody that talked to William Friedkin. Just William Friedkin is so monumental that just knowing somebody that talked to William Friedkin is just like a huge thing. Because dang, William Friedkin, I don't. It's hard to really grasp around it if you're not in the filmmaking community. I think William Friedkin definitely has a stay in the filmmaking community. When you talk to a lot of people, at least from my experience, that are into film and stuff like that, they know of William Friedkin. They know of his importance, but outside of that, the mainstream really does not. And this isn't like Joe Rogan or anything, like a huge podcast, but I wanted to put my effort and do anything I could to bring more awareness to him, especially since he just sadly passed away and his birthday was just this past week.
I'll be interested to see his new film that is premiering at the Venice Film Festival tomorrow. I don't know when it's going to hit mainstream release, but I'll definitely watch that one.
Do you know what it's called?
The Kane Mutiny Court Martial. I think it's got Kiefer Sutherland starring in it.
That'll be interesting.
I didn't know he was working on it.
Yeah, I'll check it out too. Singleton, Tarantino, Scorsese. Friedkin is probably his 7th or 8th. That's probably. You got him higher than me. He's probably my 9th or 10th. So yeah. Some great J.J. Abrams. That's an interesting one. I can see that. Super 8's a really good movie. Scorsese, of course. Tarantino, of course. Nolan, Singleton, of course. But yeah, for me, if I was going top 5 directors, Lawson's the old man when it comes to film here. I'll say, because he likes the older directors, and he probably's oh, Jacob with his mainstream stuff. But my favorite director is Christopher Nolan, always number 1. And then Spielberg is probably number 2. Scorsese's definitely top. I can't say Scorsese's not. Scorsese's somewhere in the top 5. Tarantino is probably top 5, and then Denis Villeneuve, actually, which a lot of people. I just love Denis Villeneuve. Blade Runner 2049, Dune, Arrival, Enemy, Sicario, Prisoners. That's an underrated guy too. That makes great films. But yeah, that'd probably be my top 5 if I was going. So Friedkin's probably 9 or 10, honestly, when I think about it. I'd have to think more. There's so many directors out there that you think about, because I love them. Michael Mann is probably number 6, honestly. Michael Mann has grown huge in mine. Michael Mann has become one of my favorites quickly. I love Michael Mann. His style, the vibes, everything about Michael Mann. I'm a Michael Mann stan now. And then De Palma. De Palma did a lot of. The only problem with De Palma is, if you don't have Hitchcock, you don't have De Palma. And I mean, you can say that for The Exorcist and like all these possession movies, but really, if you don't have Hitchcock, you really don't have De Palma because he takes so much influence from Hitchcock. That's my only issue.
His later career wasn't really that. Scarface, I don't see a lot of Hitchcock in that.
Yeah, like Scarface, yeah.
Or Carlito's Way or
Carly,
Untouchable. I think those are pure De Palma film. You can definitely see the influence of the camera movement and really visually telling a story. But unless it's a film like Body Double or Dress to Kill, I don't see a big Hitchcock influence in De Palma's films.
yeah, like Dress to Kill was his basically Psycho, honestly. But I love Dress to Kill. I honestly do. Dress to Kill is amazing, and Scarface too.
Body Double sucked. We watched that together.
Yes, me and him watched that together. Body Double is basically just copying Vertigo and what's the other one?
Rear Window.
Rear Window and Vertigo is that's what Body Double basically is. It's not good, but yeah. I'm gonna swap Abrams for Sam Raimi. Actually, Sam is 5 and Abrams is 6.
I like Sam Raimi.
Sam Raimi. We wouldn't have. I mean, I'm wearing a Spider-Man shirt right now. We wouldn't have superhero movies that we do today if it wasn't for Sam Raimi or horror. I mean, Sam Raimi is a big horror influence as well.
Army of Darkness.
Evil Dead 2, Evil Dead. There's only 3, you idiot. There's a remake. I was thinking of the remake. It's not Raimi though. But yeah, Evil Dead is just. I mean, we talked about Evil Dead a few episodes back when Evil Dead Rise came out. I think that was actually my first episode. Was talking about Evil. So like, yeah. So like you see, and that's like, I know this is a Friedkin tribute, but like when you get in that conversation, you can see like directors just film is so important. That's such a like. I feel like that's just like the most basic stupid statement ever. Just film is so important, man. But like,
I remember Friedkin saying in an interview that films beget other films. He saw Citizen Kane and was so inspired he wanted to make films, and we see his movies, and now we want to make films, and somebody's hopefully going to see our movies and want to make films.
Yeah, it's just such a. I mean, it's just there's so much. It's hard to put into words the importance of film and like I said, that's why we're doing this. Friedkin was so important to film and what he did. I mean, we wouldn't have the chase scenes we would have if it wasn't for him breaking laws and the French Connection. We wouldn't have The Conjuring, Insidious, like I said, if it wasn't for him making The Exorcist. It's just he is such a monumental director. I mean, he's of important when it comes to importance. I mean, he's probably more important than 90% of directors, honestly. I mean, he's one of the most important when it comes to like what we see now in modern day cinema and what we've been seeing for the past 50 years, 40 years. So,
and he was so versatile. The films he made, the life he lived. He went over to Europe and directed a couple operas in the 90s, like live operas. He loved European culture. He loved art. He he just was a very cultured guy, and it shows in his films.
Yeah, I mean it does.
The famous shot in The Exorcist of the car pulling up and the light shining down from the window, he got that from a painting.
That's interesting. I mean, the most iconic shot for me is, of course, the priest, Max von Sydow's priest, standing outside under the street lamp.
That's the one he got from the painting.
It's
I don't remember what the painting was called. My memory's too bad.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. And like, I mean, that comes to ask Deontay's asking, would we ever do a supernatural horror film? I mean, we kind of did. I mean, he did. It's his film. Uh, I just helped. But Phantom of the Fields is, I mean, it's a supernatural horror film technically.
Yeah.
I mean,
I went for more of a thriller than a horror, but yeah, I guess it's got some horror stuff in it.
but yeah,
People have told me anyway that they thought it was.
yeah. I mean, go and I mean, you can even see in that film Wes Craven influence too. I mean,
Probably John Carpenter more than anybody.
John Carpenter just. I felt like I was on a John Carpenter set when I was on set when I was helping you make the film with all the blue lights.
John was probably number one biggest influence in film for me. But Friedkin certainly, and Wes, yeah. It's in Spielberg, a lot of guys. You see great films and you want to make great films.
Exactly. And like for me, especially lately, watching Michael Mann, he's really influenced. Like that's such a weird. Like a lot of people, will say, Spielberg, Scorsese, Tarantino. I'm over here, Michael Mann, but like, just Michael Mann's. I want to create movies like he does, where it has such a vibe and atmosphere. Like Michael Mann, because we might as well just call this our favorite director's tribute at this point. But like, not to get on a tangent here, but Michael Mann, I think he is, when it comes to atmosphere, he is one of the best at atmosphere. And Michael Mann, just his films just all have that, even if they're not great. Like even films like Black Hat, which is about a hacker, not a great movie. Chris Hemsworth is in it. I mean, the guy that plays Thor for all you Marvel fans, but it's not a great movie, but it still has an atmosphere. And like Collateral, Heat, Manhunter, even his Miami Vice film, and I mean he made the TV show Miami Vice, or directed it. Just the vibes. Michael Mann just knows how to do vibes, and that's kind of how I want my films to be. Have like a vibe to them, like an atmospheric feel to them. And Michael Mann is definitely a big influence. Nolan is probably my number one. I've been a Nolan fan since I got into film. Nolan was the first director where I was like, man, that's a I mean, Spielberg technically would probably be the first when I was a little kid with Jurassic Park and Jaws and stuff. But like, if I'm talking like if I thought about it, Nolan is probably mine when it comes to just like inspiration, because he is so down to detail and so just like studies. I mean, like the man is like a master of physics just so he could make a movie. I mean, like he is super brain intelligence, and he's a big one for me too. But yeah, I mean, and Friedkin will always be there though, just with The Exorcist. And yeah, I mean, would we ever do a supernatural horror film? I mean, Phantom of the Fields. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd like to at one point or another. I mean, it'd be hard. It would be really hard because, like, I don't know how it's hard to go into supernatural, because when you think about supernatural horror, you think about like Exorcist, obviously, and like ghosts and stuff like that. So it's hard to like go into making a film and being like, well, I'm going to make a supernatural horror, but then you're like, well, it's never going to be as good as Exorcist. So what's the point? Like, I mean, a guy trumped me back in the 70s. Like, I'm already behind. Like,
that's what Friedkin always said. The last interview he ever gave, they were talking about The Exorcist, and he said, I'll never make a film as good as Citizen Kane. And he said anybody that's ever seen that movie, he said, my movies are going to be wanting. He said, and that's okay. That's just the way it is. That's just you see great films that on one side of the coin you want to make great films, on others you say, I can never do that. I can't make it that good. But that also shows how humble Friedkin was. He always said that his movies were like fast food compared to the gourmet meals of his favorite films, like Citizen Kane and Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which his films are gourmet meals to me.
Yeah. Like, and that's another thing about Friedkin is like, we talk about him, being very, he's very, blasé about things, and he's very matter of fact, and he's a no bullshit director, but also he's very nice and kind, and like you can tell that, and he's very humble at the same time. Like he doesn't think he's the top, he just makes films because he loves making films, and I mean
He was never pretentious, and a lot of directors can't say that.
yeah, like I mean I love Nolan, but no one's been pretentious before. I mean, like Friedkin, yeah, I've never like Friedkin has never been pretentious from what I've seen. I've never got an ounce of any of that from any of his films. Whereas like some of my other favorite filmmakers, I could say they have. So like that's another thing. He was just so realistic with his approach, and maybe that comes from his documentary background, like, or working, live TV and stuff. Maybe that, maybe that's where that comes from. But like it was always just real and raw and visceral. Like visceral is the best word to describe really his films. They're so visceral, and it's just
I remember that last interview he ever gave. He said that's why we make films for an audience. He said I've never made a film for myself. And a lot of directors make films for themselves, and it shows. But at the end of the day, it's a medium where you're entertaining an audience, and he understood that.
yeah. I mean, there's a fine line.
You have
I mean,
he, yeah, he never compromised what he liked or what he wanted, but he understood. He walked that fine line of making stuff he wanted to make his own way, and also making it for an audience and not being pretentious about it.
I mean, arguably, I think he walked the line better than a lot of directors that we would consider better than him. He walked the line better when it comes to that part. And like Deontay right here says, no one is a beast. Yes, he is. I agree. I heart 100 hearts. No one's my guy. Found footage and save money when it comes to the supernatural horror films. I mean, yeah, we could do that, but when I think about found footage, I'm like, who wants to sit down and watch this shaky camera moving?
Shaky cam nowadays. Come on, guys, find a steady cam and do it right.
Yeah, I will say, like Paranormal Activity, I've never been a fan of. I'm just like, I don't
Blair,
like I. You gotta have some. I will say, I am a hypocrite there because I do like Blair Witch. I
I
do
did.
like the Blair Witch Project. I know you. I already know you don't like it. Like, I could already guess that. But like, for me, yeah, I like the Blair Witch Project. But other than that, that's about found footage for me. Is the Blair Witch. Tarantino is pretentious. Yeah, Tarantino can get that way with dialogue, especially. He likes to. He indulges a little too much. Like, I mean, the film behind me, Once Upon a Time. Oh God, I'm moving weird. The Once Upon a Time in Hollywood poster. I mean, you could argue he got a little pretentious with that film. I liked it. I love it. But like, you could argue because it could be a shorter film. But I mean, we love Tarantino, so we're like, oh, it's okay because it's Tarantino. But like, yeah, I mean,
I like I like Tarantino, but I think he's overrated in a lot of ways. Some of his films and characters feel like cartoon characters. Their dialogue and the way they act and the situations.
I I can agree with that. I really
I don't
can.
see a groundedness and a reality in his films, especially when you see a film by like Billy Friedkin. That his films are so real, and Tarantino's are, like I say, kind of cartoonish. But I think Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs are great films.
Yeah, I mean that and then Django are my top three for Tarantino. Which I know you're not a big fan of Django, but
Couldn't get into that one.
Blair Witch scarred some folks. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of the Blair Witch thing is though is when it came out, they uh they marketed it as a real thing. Like they marketed like the people were actually in the woods, and like they even had a because this was back when like the internet first started. So like they even had a website where like you could go to, and it would like be like help find these missing kids, and like they had like it was in like newspapers and stuff, and like the marketing was just so good on the Blair Witch Project. If you're I mean I have a minor in marketing, so like I admire that because it is like the marketing of that film was top tier. Like they made it seem real and it scared people, and people thought they were watching real things, which really, I guess you could maybe see that, but like they're not going to let you watch somebody actually die in a movie theater. So technically you don't see anybody die, but yeah, Blair Witch definitely did scar some people, especially late '90s. It was the huge rage. It's what created paranormal. Again, if we talk about influence, the Paranormal Activity doesn't exist if there's not a Blair Witch. There's like The Conjuring, Insidious, all those don't exist if there's not. Think about that. The Conjuring and the Insidious are arguably two of the highest grossing horror franchises of all time now. Like when it comes to like box office, they are the highest grossing. They're up there for sure. Halloween, obviously. Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. There hasn't been one in over a decade now, so we can't really count those anymore. But like, the highest grossing box office, especially now, yeah, Conjuring and Insidious. And if it wasn't for Friedkin directing The Exorcist, we wouldn't have those. And that's another thing. When I saw The Conjurings before I watched The Exorcist, I'm pretty sure. I think I saw them before I had seen The Exorcist. So I watched them first, and then I watched The Exorcist, and then when I came back to The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2, they didn't hold up as well. They're valued. I still love the first Conjuring. It's in my top 10 favorite horror films of all time. I do still love the first Conjuring. The Conjuring 2 is a great sequel. It's not one of my. It wasn't my top. Both of them were in my top 5 favorite horror films of all time at one point, which is crazy to me to even admit that. I feel like I should turn in my film lover card. Delete my letterbox immediately. Just go on letterbox and just delete it. But like, yeah, because like when you rewatch those movies, yeah, they're not masterpieces, but when you watch The Exorcist and you go back to those, you're like, well, it's like you see the influence there, and you're like, well, The Exorcist. I could just watch The Exorcist if I want to watch Possession. Like, I'd rather watch it. I love James Wan, but I'd probably watch Friedkin over James Wan.
And I think the reason The Exorcist was so effective is something a lot of modern horror films miss. That's he showed the characters their normal life, let the audience get invested in them, and then slowly kind of added in the supernatural things. And the mom had a total real reaction. She was, what the hell's going on? They take her and get her test, and the tests come back, everything's okay, and it's portrayed totally realistically and not voodoo doctory at all.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like she has like CAT scans. They take her to the doctor. Like they like really, it's not really even a possession movie until the third act almost. It's really like a investigation. What's going on with this girl? Something's not right. There's a little bit of supernatural elements where like she goes in the attic and the flame goes out, and she's talking to Mr. Howdy on the Ouija board or whatever. But like, it's really it's very procedural how he goes through it. Like he's like the mother, she's not religious, so she takes him to the doctor, and then it ends up. I think she ends up with the Catholic Church or something. They're like,
Yeah,
you should go.
Laughs at her at first when she's asked about an exorcism. He laughs it off and says, "We kind of do psychiatry now."
Yeah, like it's done so realistically that I think that's why it's better, because when you look at films like The Conjuring, they bring in the Warrens like immediately after creepy stuff starts happening. I get that because when you do see chairs flying around, but at the same time,
you're not as invested in the characters because you didn't spend as much time with them.
No, the character work is just on a different level. It's just a different echelon of character work. In The Conjuring, you're just kind of waiting for the next scare. In The Exorcist, you're invested in the whole film. The Conjuring, you're waiting on to see the demon, to see the creepiness, And again, I'm not downing The Conjuring because I love James Wan, and it's a top 10 horror film for me, but it's just a difference of filmmaking, and it just shows how good. The Conjuring is still great, and it shows how good The Exorcist is. Which,
and he never saw it as a horror film. He said that interview after interview, he never saw The Exorcist as a horror film. He didn't try to make it scary. He said he tried to make a film about the mystery of faith.
And you get that, and like it's especially, I will give him credit because the person I showed it to, I showed her the director's cut. So that message kind of does get lost in the director's cut a little bit about the whole him regaining his faith. It kind of gets lost, but like a lot of people don't see that in that film, and it's so crazy to me that that theme is still missed. Like it's so like you can see if you just watch it, it's so prevalent. It's not just the little girl spinning her head, throwing up pea soup. It's not just that, her doing graphic things with the cross. It's not that. I mean, it is that, but some of that's hilarious. But like, it's more than that. It's there's more. There's the actual theme being told. There's something, you know. Father Karras is the main character. It's not the little girl. It's not the mom. You know, it's Father Karras, and we don't even get introduced to him until a little bit later in the film. Like we start out with Max von Sydow, and like it's just it's so. I guess he put it in there so well that some people just it goes over their heads. But like, I mean, I saw it from the jump. It was about a guy regaining his faith back. I mean, it's The Exorcist is a masterpiece. What else more can we say about it? I mean,
Also, the performances he got in that film, which I think a lot of people know the techniques he used. I mean, uh, when Jason Miller gets scared by the phone ringing, when he jumps, he jumped because Billy Friedkin shot off a shotgun 5 foot from him. He fired a shotgun beside him to make him jump and take. When the priest gives Karras the last rites when he dives off the stairs, he's doing the sign of the cross, and he's shaking. He's shaking because he did 10 takes that didn't work, and so Billy slapped him across the face as hard as he could, and then made him do it. And the shock of it made him shake like that.
yeah, I mean, some of that's questionable for today's. You know, you could question that today. I mean, I definitely would not be slapping anybody on my film set, but like at the end of the day, you can't argue with what the product you got. You got a masterpiece.
That was his personality, though. If you watched his interviews, you know that you expect something like that from him.
Yeah, it's just yeah. You think they would have kind of expected something going into a film with him, you know, and not condoning that, of course, but you know.
On Killer Joe, a bunch of the characters have nude scenes, and Billy. They said they did a documentary about him. They said Billy just stripped all his clothes off in front of the crew. They'd say it's no big deal. Let's do this. He was very encouraging, and he was just in it.
He was one of a kind. I mean,
Wild guy.
He was a wild man, and just there's just not much more you can say about Friedkin, honestly. I think we just exhausted it all. Like, I just want to stress, like, again, the importance of him. And actually, there is something else we can. You know about this. You tell me about this. About how the score came.
Oh, for The Exorcist?
Yeah.
Yeah, he went to meet Bernard Herrmann, who did Taxi Driver, most of Hitchcock's films, one of the greatest composers we ever had. And I think Bernard wanted to. First, he watched the film, and he came out of the screening room. He said, "Okay, I think I can save this piece of shit." He said, I'm going to go down to this church, and there's a nice organ, and I'll score it." And Billy said, "You're going to score the Exorcist on a church organ?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he said, "Thank you. Have a nice day." And he fired him. Fired one of the greatest composers of all time. And I think he turned down scores from other directors. I mean, other composers. And He ended up using temp tracks for the whole thing. Tubular bells he found in a library of temp tracks. I believe it was a there's like there's like talking after the initial theme. It's not a song. It's I forgot what it was used for, but he got all that out of temp tracks.
Yeah,
He
which is,
he was so hands on in that film that uh, he would have people go to the theaters, and if they had a hole in their screen that they projected it on, he wouldn't give them a print of The Exorcist. He made them go out and buy a new screen. I mean, he was so hands on in that film to make it the best experience that the audience could have.
and I mean, that was something intriguing that I loved is just that the fact that he could have had Bernard Herrmann, who obviously, I mean, like you said, one of the greatest composers of film composers of all time, and instead he just says bye, get out of here, and then literally just uses temp tracks, which if for people that aren't into like film knowledge and know film, it's just like stuff you can. It's basically like public access type stuff, like stuff you can just find basically. Like you don't have to, it's not like it's not scored for that film. It's you just you find it, and like they use it a lot during editing, like like in the early processes of editing. And Stanley
Give,
Kubrick did the same thing with 2001: A Space Odyssey. He did the same thing uh, with that, but that's what temp tracks are. But yeah, like he just used what he found in like Tubular Bells. Now you can't hear that without thinking about The Exorcist. It's one of the most iconic scores in a horror film. And he got that just from, they didn't score that. I mean, that's
that's
just,
that's a big lesson from his career is don't compromise on your. If you have a film in your head, don't compromise on it.
yeah, yeah, he just came off the French Connection. I mean, he talked about this in the interview with Nicholas Winding Refn. He said, yeah, he was a little full of himself at the time during the 70s. He said that he thought he couldn't be hurt. He said he did feel a little up there. I remember because I watched that interview right after he died again, and he did say that where he was like, yeah, he's like, I thought, when Sorcerer, he's like, I thought I couldn't, I thought it couldn't bomb, like I couldn't be touched. So he did have an arrogance to him. Arguably, I mean, well credited. He made the French Connection, The Exorcist. So
He
I mean,
wasn't. I was listening to a little clip of an audiobook he did, and he talked about his arrogance, the missed opportunities he had from it. He said he came into his office when he was shooting Cruising. There was an envelope on his desk, and he opened it up, and there were some paintings inside, and he didn't like them. And this artist wrote him a letter saying that he was a fan, and he made him these paintings. And Billy said, I threw them away. He just threw them in the trash. And he said years later, I saw that artist's name, and one of his paintings sold from that period sold for $15 million. He said, I also got a cassette tape on my desk. I listened to it. He said it wasn't something I would be interested in, and it was a letter uh, from an artist wanting me to direct a music video. This guy's name was Prince. He said I never answered his call, and just like that, he said his arrogance cost him a lot, but I think he learned from it.
yeah. And I mean, I didn't know that story. That's crazy. That Prince wanted him to direct the music video, but like, that's absolutely insane. But like, so I mean, because like because we don't want to prop him up like he's God either. I mean, he's human, so he all had faults. I mean, he was just coming off the French Connection and Exorcist. He made two masterpieces. I mean, when you're younger and you're in that, I mean, it can go to your head easily. So like, yeah. But like again, in his older days, like I watched an interview, he said he regrets a lot of that he wish he wouldn't have acted like that, and he wish he wouldn't the arrogance like just like anybody else would. And also in that interview, he says something great about oh my gosh, my brain is so terrible. There's something he said in that interview that I wanted to bring up that was really important. What was it? What was it? He was talking about. Oh, I know what it was. He was talking about how he wanted when he was making Sorcerer, which is when nice segue from the Exorcist to Sorcerer. When he was making Sorcerer, he wanted it because he said when he would go to other countries and they would show the Exorcist, they didn't have subtitles. So like people, and there's a lot of dialogue in The Exorcist, so like people didn't understand what was going on. So he said when he made Sorcerer, he wanted to tell as much visually as he could possible. Like he wanted as minimal dialogue as he could because he wanted everybody from every. This is how much he wanted to entertain people, and like this is how much he cared about his audience and cared about like fans of films and like gave film fans all the credit is because he wanted to make films where anybody in any country could watch it and understand the story. And in this interview, he said that he wanted to make Sorcerer as minimal dialogue as possible, where you could watch it and nobody would be confused. Like you could get the story just by visuals. That's what he wanted to do, and I feel like for the most part he did that with Sorcerer because there is a lot of minimal. It is very minimal in dialogue when you compare it to French Connection or Exorcist. The opening is so interesting because it's a foreign film for the first like 20 minutes. Like it's told in like different languages because you're following 4 different people. So like the first 20, 30 minutes, there's not a lot of English being spoken. And then they start talking English once they start getting to know each other. But for like that movie is subtitled for like half. And it's like
people walked out. I think they had to put a sign in the lobby saying this is not a foreign speaking film because I think they had trouble with people walking out.
Yeah, he said that. He actually said that. He said that in an interview with Nicholas Winding Refn. He said people kept walking out because they thought it was a foreign film. But like, for me, it worked because like I knew I was like, okay, this is I knew just from knowing about it, but like it works because I mean it's realistic. People aren't going to talk in English in every country, so I mean it's because 3 of the people aren't even American. I mean 3 of the main characters aren't American, and their English isn't their first language. 3 people, one's French. I want to say one's somewhere in South America, I think it is.
I can't remember.
And then another one is, I think, the Middle East or something, I'm going to say. But yeah, like 3 of them aren't even from America. And like, they're all terrible people. Like if you look at them they're not good people. And they all convene in this little town. And and he even says this in an interview, it's about destiny and how like fate. That's what Sorcerer is about. It's like destiny and fate, and like they did these terrible things, and then it leads them all to this village where they can do this one thing, and then maybe they can get out because they'll get paid and they can get out of this terrible spot they're in. But then, as you watch, fate gets all of them. And even at the end, you think it's a happy ending for a little bit, or maybe, I mean, with Friedkin, I was like, I didn't expect a happy ending, but like for a lot of people probably watching that, the ending is, I mean, Roy Scheider, he got the money, he's dancing with a random waitress that was there at the restaurant, and then it just ends with people that were looking for him for a long time finally catch up to him. And then that whole movie is about destiny and fate, and it's such a masterpiece because you get it, and none of that is told in dialogue. Like none of it is dialogue. Like there's no conversation about destiny or fate or anything. Like none of that's in the movie. There's not like a whole exposition where they're like, yeah, I'm a terrible person, so fate's catching up to me, or destiny. And like, and nowadays in films they would talk like that. In his film, they never mention destiny or fate once. And I mean, Sorcerer, it's literally on the side of a truck. Like it's not even mentioned in the film. And it's all about and he tells it all visually. Like you get that it's about destiny and fate just because you see how terrible these characters are, and just what they're doing. And I
And
mean,
yet,
you get
just like in that conversation I had with him, he said that his career was a happy accident. He said it was just fate that I got into this business and luck. So that they were, he was a big believer in that. But going back to Sorcerer, how great was that bridge scene?
yeah, like just absolutely insane. And I remember I watched a video on the making of it, and I can't remember. Did they do like? I know some of it was in a real actual river, but I think some was on a sound stage, wasn't it?
I I remember it would almost had to have been with all the rain and the wind they had. I don't know how they
Yeah,
could have done it out in the middle of the jungle, but either way, there's no CG. They did it. They had a guy out on a bridge with a truck on it, and the bridge was rope and wood. You could tell that guy wasn't having a good time.
yeah, and they say that like, and all the actors did their stunts. Like every time you see their face, it's actually them. It's not. I mean, of course, they use doubles and like when you can't see them from far away and stuff. But like every time you see their face, it's actually the actors. There's no trickery. There's no work. So like even the actors were in some dangerous situations there, and they did their own stunts. And I think he said like I forgot which one, but one of the actors wasn't too fond of that. But like he also said that he was a lot of those guys that he didn't even want to cast. Like that cast came together by fate too. It
Oh,
was
did you?
the Middle Eastern guy. The Middle Eastern guy is the only guy that he actually wanted to play the part. Like he got him to play the part, but the other three he wanted other people to play the parts.
He wanted Steve McQueen for Scheider's part, and he said he was too arrogant. McQueen wanted
His
he
wife.
he wanted his wife to be an executive producer, and he said, I would do that in a heartbeat to have Steve McQueen in that movie."
But I mean, he didn't want to compromise his vision. He's like, I don't want some, he's like, you have to give her, because he had to give her executive producer was the thing. He's like, he's like, I don't want her to be on, because, and like, I mean, that's understandable. I mean, he didn't compromise his vision. And honestly, I think it worked out because it's a masterpiece in my eyes. So, I mean, I think Roy Scheider did just as good as anybody.
You talk about casting. Did you hear the story about the I can't think of his name on the French Connection, the one that gets in the train and waves like that as he's driving off?
Yeah, I forgot what he said though.
He said
I know what you're talking about.
he said to his casting director, "There's a guy in this film called Belle de Jour, which is a good film, by the way." He said, the guy that played this?" He said, "Give me that." He said, "Oh yeah, his name's I think Fernando Rey is what he said." And he said, "Yeah, get me that guy." And he goes to pick up the guy at the airport, and it's a totally different guy. And he said, "We're driving to the hotel," and he said, you're Fernando Rey, right?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "You were in Belle de Jour?" He said, "Oh, I wasn't in Belle de Jour." He said, "I was in some other films by Louis Louis Buñuel." And he said, "Well, just what I would envision, you have to shave your goatee." He said, "Oh, I could never shave my goatee." And he said, "Okay." And he dropped him off at the hotel, and he called the casting agent. He said, "You dumbass." He said, "You cast the wrong guy." He said, "He wasn't in Belle de Jour." And so he said, "Well, let me look into it." And he called him back. He said, "The guy you want is Francisco Rabal." He said, "He's not available. He's working on another film, and he can't speak a word of English." And so they were stuck with Fernando Rey, and he gave a great performance in the film. It's just a piece of luck.
Yeah. And it's just crazy, man. It's that, and I mean, if you want to take one of the things to take away definitely from this is go watch Sorcerer. It's an underseen masterpiece, in my opinion. I think more people should see it, and because it actually blew me away when I went. Like, it shocked me because I was like, when I was going into it, I was like, it came out in the 70s. I was like, I don't know how this is gonna be, and then I was like, it's an epic. Like, it's epic in scale. Like, it is huge in scale. Like, it is definitely him going balls to the wall with everything. Like, he's just like, we're gonna have a monsoon happen on this sound. We're gonna have a giant truck on a bridge. We're gonna have huge explosions. I mean, like he went all out on it, and it's, in my opinion, his underseen masterpiece. It's just epic.
Yeah, it's a shame it didn't do well at the box office. I'd watch it over Star Wars any day.
Yeah, it's an epic tale of fate, and and fate and destiny, and I love it. It's great. So definitely go check out Sorcerer if you have not. And of course, Exorcist and French Connection, check out, obviously. And I would also, I can't recommend the other ones because I haven't seen them but I would recommend The Hunted. I would say definitely check that out too.
I would say watch To Live and Die in L.A. That one's pretty good.
Because, I mean, it's just amazing what he did for film and just in general.
And if you want to be thoroughly entertained, watch his interviews on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm just is there anything else you got on Friedkin? Any tidbits, any information?
I'm sure there are. I can't think of any right now. There's a lot with that guy. It's one of the most interesting, talented, insane filmmakers of all time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Lawson closed it out with that. I think because, I mean, we really don't have much. I mean, we stressed his importance. We went over the French Connection. We mainly talked about The Exorcist, which I tried to refrain from, but it's just so hard to talk about Friedkin without talking about The Exorcist. Like, it's so difficult. So, I mean, The Exorcist, we got great information there, and then Sorcerer. I feel like we covered enough. The French Connection, I would have liked to cover a little bit more, but I just haven't seen it in a few years, and my memory's so bad that I'd have to rewatch it again. But, like, definitely go check out all three of those: To Live and Die in L.A. and The Hunted for sure, and check out the rest too. Just check out all Friedkin, honestly.
Yeah, don't take our opinions. That's the thing about film, that we could watch it and think it's great, and you guys would think it's terrible, or vice versa.
I just think it's boring or whatever. It's just know that, like, Friedkin is and will always be a legend. Like,
he understood human nature better than I think any filmmaker I've ever seen.
I agree with that. He was so good at just telling great stories in morally gray areas and morally gray characters, and it's just amazing what he did.
And a nice man, but ever since his passing, there's been a big hole in cinema that I don't think will ever be filled.
Yeah, I don't think you can replace Friedkin.
I'm not sure what the modern landscape of film would be if we didn't have Friedkin.
I mean, I completely agree. And I mean, look at me. I'm fake.
We wouldn't have great filmmakers like Jacob Smith if we didn't have Friedkin.
Oh yeah. Just the greatest filmmaker of all time. Never been a director, but yeah, greatest filmmaker.
Just wait, watch how good this guy is.
Well, I appreciate that. I know you're just lying to the audience, but I appreciate that. Because I feel like after that you're gonna cuss me out. But like, yeah, yeah, we'll see, we'll
We're
see
both
where.
working on films right now, so
Yeah, me and him to really close the broadcast out. Me and him are we're gonna be we're writing and directing 2 films right now in tandem, and they will be in production sometime when our crazy selves like actually quit procrastinating and get it done. But you know what? You can't rush greatness. That's what I say. You can't rush greatness, and I think you're going to really enjoy these 2 great films that come out from me and him. You're going to see both of them under Lawson Film Works, by the way, the new A24, the new production company, the new one. So forget A24, forget Neon, Lawson Film Works, because it's going to have a film by Lawson again, of course. I mean, he's in the name, and then a film by little old Jacob Smith, Jacob R. Smith, I am known as. But
on TV.
yes, I am on IMDb actually as an I am the Phantom, and actually that's a great plug. Go watch again. Watch the Phantom of the Fields. Watch the original, and then watch the director's cut. Watch both cuts.
I would
You wanna
say
talk
watch
about
it. I would say watch the director's cut, but to
Well,
each
then
his own.
I'm trying to get you more views, but like watch both cuts. Like go watch the original and then watch the directors and like see the masterpieces. I mean, the director. I'm a fan of the director's cut more because I'm in it more. But like the selfishly, you know. But like I feel like I am the better Phantom because I'm so Slender Man anyway that it works. But like
You're just
I,
scary looking.
I'm just scary looking in general, so it's just scarier, you know. Just because it's me, it's like, oh my god, there's Jacob,
Because I
run
know.
away. Yeah, and like, but yeah, in all seriousness, go check out Lawson Filmworks. Go check out Phantom of the Fields. He needs to do better with. I'm trying to help him with the social media stuff. He needs to do better with the marketing on social media. But he made a great short film, and then he edited it basically, and then reduxed it, and then made it even better than it already was somehow. So
Thank you.
check that out because it is like I'm not even no bullshit. Like I know we're me and him are friends, so it may seem like I'm coming I'm biased, but I'm definitely not. Like if you watch it from an outside perspective, it's the director's cut. It is like especially for a first short film, it is a great statement. And I think I don't know about me. We'll see about me. I'm questionable,
I
but
have faith he'll make a great film.
But when it comes to Lawson, definitely going to be seeing his name in actual like feature films. Definitely, like I don't see how not. I really don't. Just working with you on set and just being your friend and being close to you, I know like how good you are and like how much work you put into it and how much passion you put into it. And like even I mean you're gonna make great films. Like it's undeniable. Like I've like just a talent. It's undeniable. And like we'll see how the Jacob R. Smith.
I can tell you you're gonna make great films because you're passionate about cinema, and that's the main thing. There's I think the key to success in this business is talent, luck, hard work, and connections. You've got the connections, you've got the talent, and you put in the hard work, and you kind of make your own luck. There's a lot of people out there making money, a lot of money with films now that have no talent. If
I
you have
mean,
talent, it puts you really above the competition.
just look at I'll say it. Look at some of the newer films today. There's there's a lack of that, and I feel like we're definitely going to be. This is coming. This is coming to the Lawson and Jacob. Let's have a kumbaya, your pat on the back show. But like, yeah, to end it off, look out for the 2 films that we're working on coming out for Jacob's Film Perspectives. Jacob, I'm Jacob, obviously. I mean, I have a podcast dedicated to film, so I'm obviously passionate about film. But look forward to Lawson's film. Go watch Family in the Fields, director's cut. I say watch both just to get him more views. But if you're gonna watch one, watch the director's cut because that's the one that's more his vision that he likes. But watch both. But anyway, yeah, I mean that's about it.
But if we're gonna end, I got a little quote here from his wife after he died. I think it sums it up pretty good. That he had a big, wonderful life. There was no dream left unfulfilled. I think, how many people can say that?
I mean, that's well said. I mean, William Friedkin, man, just a legend. Rest in peace. And I don't know when I'll come back with episode 6. I don't know when episode 6 will be back. But I will probably be talking about the new Exorcist movie at some point. Look out for that. But really, just go watch William Friedkin. All right, bye, y'all.
All right.